straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. Could an admitted rapist also be a serial killer? Our exclusive interview with one of his survivors and the detective who says there's more to the case.
He truly is a predator, an animal, pursuing things that are really, really bad.
More arrests for the siege on the nation's capital, how an officer's quick thinking likely saved lives. Plus, should a woman be executed for killing a mother to steal her baby? Her defense says she's mentally ill. And a legal loss for the so-called Doomsday Cult couple, why attorneys for Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell are crying foul play.
Red flags are raised.
The cold rape case is not only a serial rapist, but possibly a serial killer too. Angenette Levy spoke exclusively with a woman who survived a brutal attack 42 years ago.
Yeah, Brian, Michael Dean Tate is actually 78 years old, and he has accepted a plea deal that will send him to prison for 12 years. Detectives in Boone County, Kentucky say that Tate confessed to them that he had raped several young girls. And the woman who survived that attack back in 1978 said that Tate had told her that he actually killed several of the girls.
How hard has this been, just living with this for so many years?
It ruined my life. It changed every aspect of my life. I was just never the same. Always afraid that somebody was going to kidnap me again, like he did.
He is Michael Dean Tate. The survivor couldn't put a name with the face of the man who attacked her for more than 40 years. It was October 1st, 1978, in Park Hills, Kentucky, when the petite 22-year-old ballet dancer pulled into her garage and was grabbed from behind. She was taken a couple of blocks away, raped and tortured for hours in Tate's car.
I will say it was very violent, and there wasn't anything he didn't do, you know. It was just my reaction to all of it that saved me, and my non-reaction that saved me.
Surprisingly, Tate let her go, but not before making an admission.
He told me I was the only one he let go. He gave me the number 13 in 1978. And I know he didn't stop then. So that was the number of the girls he told me he killed.
She's an amazing person, and what she did to survive is just kind of crazy.
The survivor's case went cold until Boone County Sheriff's Detective Coy Cox looked into it in 2019. Cox and his cold case detective partner were looking at a murder and rape case around that same time that had similarities. Cox won't comment on which case, but the sheriff's website lists the murder of Carol Sue Klaber in June of 1976 as a cold case. An old news story says Klaber was seen getting into a car with a young man that day, taking her bicycle out of the trunk of his car. Klaber had been raped and beaten to death, so Cox decided to look into similar cases, including the survivors.
She told the detectives, the police officers early on, that he grabbed the door right there. So turns out that fingerprint, when they first submitted it to the FBI, there was no match in the database. So we submitted it, and that's when we got this information back on Michael D. Tate, that this fingerprint belongs to Michael D. Tate.
Cox and his partner went to Georgia to interview Tate, who had a history of not talking to police.
And I can't remember my exact words, but I said, "Do you want to talk about it?" And he said, "I hurt a lot of women. I raped a lot of women." Because I just want to tell them I'm sorry.
Cox says Tate preferred girls between 14 and 16 and even younger, and confessed over 4 hours to multiple rapes in many states, his job enabling him to travel the country. But when it came to discussing murders, Cox said Tate clammed up.
A lot of things that his body did, when we asked certain questions, it's like, we need to keep working harder because he has done a lot more serious crimes.
Cox says Tate was caught in the act of raping a girl in Chicago years ago and tried to lure 2 girls in Oak Park, Illinois. He was arrested for gross sexual imposition in Cincinnati in 1974. That case later dismissed. The investigation is far from over, and the survivor is grateful.
The gods of the cold cases. I feel like I owe my life to them because now I can spend the rest of my life a lot happier. All I want is him to admit to what he did.
That rape survivor, her father was actually a police officer who was killed in the line of duty before she was even born. So she had never even met him. And she said that somehow, she believes in the spiritual aspect of this, that somehow he could have had a hand in helping solve this, and that he's been with her throughout this. I actually reached out to Michael Tate's lawyer twice for a comment. I have not yet heard back. Tate will be formally sentenced to that 12 years in prison later this week. Brian.
Now, Angenette, this is the one part I'm kind of confused about. How was Tate not locked up if he'd been caught committing other sex crimes in the past?
That's a very good question. And Detective Cox, addressed that with me when we did this interview. He said that sexual assault was simply treated, sadly, much differently back in the 70s and early 80s. The penalties weren't quite as harsh, and sometimes the victims were dismissed. So that is part of the reason. And also, he just wasn't caught for crimes that maybe were a little more serious on the scale of sexual assault.
Gotcha. Joining us for a closer look at this case is veteran SWAT member and Law&Crime analyst Lisa Lockwood, along with Angenette, Levy, and Terri Austin. Lisa, talk to us about what it's going to take to match Tate's confessions with the multiple cases in multiple states.
Well, the FBI right now is trying to pin him on other cases because of the information that they have from this victim, who now we are getting justice for after 42 years. The fact that there was a fingerprint, it was a cold case. What we need to do, the FBI is certainly doing, is looking at the other places that he lived. He was in Ohio, he was in Kentucky, he was in Illinois, he was in Tennessee. So all of these regions, they need to try and find out what his address was, looking at driver's license registration information, where he filed taxes, where he lived, and start opening up cold cases of Jane Does in those areas to try and find out, did we have Jane Does who were raped? Were they brutally raped? Did they fit the same profile as the victim who came forward in this particular case?
Gotcha. Now, Terri, Tate is 78 and has some health issues. How hopeful are you that these other cases can be solved while he's still alive to assist authorities?
Brian, you make an excellent point. The key here is for authorities to move very swiftly. He is of older age, and, he stated that he was guilty, and he's willing to disclose information about these other crimes, these other rapes. So the sooner the conversations take place, the better. It's going to be hard, though, because we know they're different locations, and so it might be difficult to coordinate.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to coordinate, but we'll see how it plays out. Thank you all for contributing. As we look back in this case, we'll obviously update you. Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, the officer being called a hero during the Capitol insurrection. And later, why the woman charged with falsely accusing a teen of stealing her
second floor!
A Capitol police officer is being hailed as a hero for his bravery during the attempted insurrection. Officials say Officer Eugene Goodman tricked a group of protesters and rioters into following him away from the Senate chamber to a hallway where more officers were waiting. More than 120 people have been arrested in connection to the chaos at the Capitol. Among them, an Iowa man identified as a leader in the group of people seen walking up the stairs and confronting Officer Goodman. Take a close look at the entire interaction.
Second floor!
Federal investigators say the man seen here in the cap leading the crowd has been identified as Doug Jensen. He was arrested at his home near Des Moines, Iowa. He's facing 5 federal charges, including trespassing and disorderly conduct. Back with me is crime analyst Lisa Lockwood and Terri Austin. Lisa, your record speaks for itself in terms of law enforcement and as a veteran. You've been doing this for some time. If you could speak with Officer Eugene Goodman about his actions that day, what would you say to him?
First of all, how honorable. His quick action, everything was on par in all of the training that police officers receive regarding crowd control. And that training has increased during all of the riots that we've been enduring since the pandemic between Antifa and BLM and right-wing fanatics. So what he did is he went into the direction where he knew other officers were there to offer assistance. He went a different direction than the actual chamber and got them away from the penetration of Congress, where we know that they had not exited that area of safety. So completely commendable. He thought on his feet, he didn't panic, and he still maintained his radio contact throughout the entire situation. So extremely commendable, and he didn't allow them to ruffle him up. He was professional and a job well done.
Exactly. Now, Terry, with arrest numbers exceeding 100, is there any of the cases that you're looking at and you're just thinking, you gotta be kidding me?
You know, the one case that stands out to me, Brian, is the arrest of Richard Barnett. He's from Arkansas. He was the man sitting at Speaker Pelosi's desk. He had his feet up on the desk, and he actually took an envelope. He said that he would, leave a quarter to pay for the envelope. But he was eventually taken into custody early Friday, and he's currently being charged with knowingly entering and restricted building, violent entry and disorderly conduct, and theft of public property. Let me tell you, a quarter is not going to do the trick. He's going to have to pay a lot more than that for the crime that he committed. I mean, he was way too bold as far as I'm concerned. And he was actually interviewed, and he had no remorse for what he had done. So well done getting this arrest.
Yeah, a quarter is not much of a defense there in that case. The one for me was Adam Johnson, who was seen taking the lectern. The first thing I thought to myself was, this guy definitely is going to want to take the stand and testify, and that's probably not going to be the best route in that case. And in other top legal news, the woman dubbed Soho Karen is out of jail on supervised release. Maya Ponsetto is facing charges of attempted robbery, grand larceny, attempted assault, and an acting in a manner injurious to a child. Police say she falsely accused the black teenager of stealing her cell phone. The teen's father, Grammy Award winner Kenyon Harold Sr., filmed the incident on his cell phone. Prosecutors say Ponsetto is a suspect in another NYC case and is charged in 3 other incidents in 2020, including DUI and driving with a suspended license. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, should authorities execute the only female on U.S. death row? Plus, a couple accused of covering up the deaths of 2 children will not have a new prosecutor, a ruling in the Lori Vallow Daybell case you don't want to miss. Lawyers for a woman set to be executed this week for cutting a baby from her mother's womb say that her life should be spared. Lisa Montgomery was convicted of using a kitchen knife to cut an 8-month-old fetus out of a woman's womb to try to raise her as her own. Bobby Jo Stinnett was found in a pool of her own blood. The baby survived and was returned to her father. Montgomery's lawyers say she suffers from mental illness brought on by childhood abuse. Her execution is scheduled for January 12th.
She was raped by her stepfather when she was just a preteen. She was sex trafficked by her mother. She is someone who was gang raped. She was gang raped and then urinated on by her rapists when she was still a child. This is a woman who went through unimaginable violence.
Returning for analysis is Lisa Lockwood and Terri Austin. Lisa, thoughts and reactions as we hear that the first woman in 70 years is scheduled for an execution.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, it's a horrific case, and it was scheduled. This was her sentence. We knew that the death penalty was coming. So this is a last-ditch effort to prove that she's not competent. The only issue I believe with that is she was competent for trial. So since this happened in 2004, her mental health has declined. So I don't know how successful they're going to be with trying to get a stay for this execution.
And Terry, that's the million-dollar question. We've seen a lot of pushes over the last couple of months, if not years, for these kind of pardons. With the clock ticking, do you see any potential last-ditch efforts that could save her life?
I don't at this point. I think the time might have expired for Montgomery. And I agree with Lisa, the fact that she was competent at the time of trial, it might be difficult to say she's not competent now. So, she has this effort that she might be able to convince Donald Trump. He has the power to grant clemency. But I think at this point, because of everything that's going on with COVID-19 and everything that's going on as far as the riots in D.C. are concerned, she's not going to be able to get his attention. And I think the hope of any sort of leniency at this point is sort of diminished.
I guess the question is, Terri, let's say that all that chaos that we're talking about that everyone's going through right now wasn't there. COVID, Capitol Hill, new president. If those were gone, do you think she'd have a good chance at clemency if all those were out the window?
She'd definitely have a better chance, Brian. I don't think I'd categorize it as good. I think because she was already found competent, that point is going to hurt her.
Yeah, I agree there. I don't think it's going to help her out, regardless of the background in today's country. When we come back, a judge's ruling in the case of the so-called Doomsday Cult couple. The legal blow to the defense of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell next. The prosecutor of the so-called Doomsday Cult couple will not be removed from the case for now. Lori Vallow and her husband Chad Daybell are facing charges of conspiracy to conceal and destruction of evidence in the deaths of Vallow's two children. The bodies of J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan were discovered buried in a shallow grave on Chad Daybell's Idaho property. They're not being charged with murder, but the prosecutor was heard on a secret recording with a meeting of Vallow's sister saying he plans to file conspiracy to commit murder charges. Their defense says that the recording should disqualify the prosecutor.
I think it becomes quite a bit more disgusting when you hear the tone and the phrases and the speed of the language and the words used. When we look at here in a summary, you have Mr. Wood admitting on this recording that he was in Hawaii at the time that Mrs. Daybell, was arrested. He was in Arizona at the time that the statements from these witnesses were taken. I still have yet to try to figure out why he's present at any of this.
An attorney for prosecutor Rob Wood says he did nothing wrong by speaking with a potential witness in the case.
Ms. Shiflett is not Mr. Daybell. She is not Ms. Vallow. She's a potential witness in the case. And there's no evidence to present that Mr. Wood directed her to say anything other than tell the truth. Courts have said the appropriate remedy for this is to cross-examine, or there's alternatives, exclude the witnesses, those types of things. So, Your Honor, based on this, based on the law in the state of Idaho, based on the law in the Supreme Court of the United States, and what we have presented to you, there is not a way to disqualify the prosecutor, Mr. Wood, from this case.
After hearing both sides, the judge ruled in the prosecution's favor.
Without knowing whether or not this potential witness will ever be called to testify at a trial, the court cannot find at this time that the interaction between Mr. Wood and the witness would render Mr. Wood's continued participation in this case unfair, and cannot determine that the prosecutor's pretrial activity will be a material issue in this case. For those reasons, then, the motions to disqualify Mr. Wood are denied. Now, if Ms. Shiflett in the future is called to testify at trial in this case, the court would require a pretrial hearing based on the evidence I heard at this hearing.
Lisa, you've interviewed witnesses and victims. Did you see anything wrong in this interview by Rob Wood?
I didn't. What the goal is to make people as comfortable as possible in order for them to divulge information and have a symbiotic relationship. So their assertion was that there was intimidation, there was coercing, there was coaching, there was influencing. They weren't able to prove any of that. And one of the things they also said is that the death penalty was brought up, and this probably scared her. But Summer was the one who brought up the death penalty and said, is it possible that she could be charged with that? And he divulged the information. He put his cards on the table and said, yeah, it is a possibility. He doesn't want to go there if that's the case. So the information that he received, I believe there was a lot of laughing during the interview, which is great because it made her feel comfortable and made her feel at ease. So I think they made the right decision in this.
Yeah, and I think at the bottom line, they also didn't actually speak to Summer Shiflett to see if this actually did affect what she was saying. Terry, you called it. The prosecutor is going to stay. What do you think the next moves are for the defense?
You know, I'm glad he's going to stay. He's a good prosecutor, but I think the defense is going to continue to make motion after motion to whittle the case down. I anticipate they're going to make motions to exclude evidence. They're going to make motions to exclude witnesses. And I think the judge is going to continue to look at the case as a whole. And hopefully, you know, on this motion, the judge actually said that there was, you know, basically no harm, no foul. And he did say that one of the remedies would be a pretrial taint hearing to determine whether or not her testimony was actually influenced by Rob Woods. And I think if, in fact, Summer is called as a witness, they could easily remedy the situation by asking her if she was influenced. And frankly, I think she will say, no, this is how I felt.
Yeah, you're definitely going to see another potential pretrial hearing here. Lisa, Terry, thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.